Episode 1, The Night My Shadow Disappeared. They say every man walks with his past behind him. Mine simply stood up and walked away. I remember that night like a wound that refuses to close. The moon hung above San Telmo like a white confession, silent, pitiless. I had just buried old Matteo, a farmer who died whispering a sin I refused to absolve. The villagers lingered near the graveyard gate, their candles flickering like frightened eyes. I blessed the coffin, drew the sign of the cross, and for a moment, the wind stopped. When I turned to leave, I saw it. Or rather, I saw nothing. My shadow, the dark twin that followed me all my life, was gone. The light from the chapel lantern fell perfectly upon me, but there was no silhouette on the ground. No shape crawling after my steps. Just the dust, the grave, and the empty light. At first, I thought it was exhaustion. 3 funerals in 2 days, endless prayers, the weight of other people's secrets. But when I entered my room that night, every candle flickered as if something unseen had followed me home. The crucifix above my bed tilted slightly to the left. The sound of dripping water came from nowhere. And then, as I reached for the Bible, I saw it again, that impossible absence. The wall behind me remained pure white. No shadow. No proof that I still belonged to this world of light. I tried to sleep, but the silence pressed against my ears like a scream held too long. At midnight, the church bell rang once. Just once. The kind of toll reserved for souls that die unconfessed. Then came the whisper. Soft. Close. Inside the room. Father Aurelio. I froze. The voice was low, uneven, like breath scraping through soil. You left me there, it said. In the grave. With him. My throat tightened. I lit a candle and turned toward the sound. The flame swayed violently, not from wind, but from movement. There, on the wall, for an instant, my shadow returned. But it was wrong. It didn't move when I moved. It faced me. The figure was darker than night itself, the outline of a man kneeling, hands clasped as if in prayer. But when it lifted its head, I saw the curve of its lips, smiling. I dropped the candle. The light died. Darkness swallowed everything. Yet even in that blackness, I felt it, cold breath brushing against my ear, the same whisper, now trembling with rage. You buried your sins in holy ground, Father, and forgot that shadows don't die. I wanted to scream, but faith turned to stone inside me. Outside, dogs howled as if answering a command. Somewhere deep beneath the chapel, something was moving, dragging itself closer with every heartbeat. When dawn came, the villagers said they saw footprints around the graveyard. Not mine. Not Matteo's. 2 sets. One human, and one that bled light instead of casting it. That was the night my shadow disappeared. And the first night I began to fear the daylight. Episode 2, The Confession at Midnight. They say every priest carries 2 kinds of confessions, the ones he hears, and the ones he hides. That night, I began to hear my own. The church was empty when the first bell struck midnight. The moonlight spilled through the stained glass, painting bleeding saints across the floor. I should have been asleep, but sleep no longer came to me since the night my shadow vanished. Every creak of the wooden pews sounded like something breathing. I sat in the confessional, hands trembling around the rosary. It was a habit, or maybe a shield. The smell of old incense clung to the air, that sweet, sickly scent of sanctity mixed with decay. Then I heard it, the soft rustle of robes on the other side of the wooden partition. Someone had entered the confessional. At first, I was almost relieved. A late soul seeking forgiveness, perhaps the loneliness had driven me mad, and this voice would prove I wasn't alone. I cleared my throat, whispering, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." But the voice that answered was mine. "Bless me, Father, for you have sinned." I froze. My breath turned shallow. "Who is there?" I demanded, though my voice broke like old wood. The other voice laughed, low, tired, and heavy with something that felt like centuries. "You buried me, remember," it whispered. "You locked me under earthen prayers. But the earth doesn't forget." The confession grill rattled. I could see movement behind it, a darker shade within the dark, shifting like oil. It leaned closer, until I could almost feel heat against my cheek. "Do you remember the orphanage fire?" it asked. My blood ran cold. That memory was supposed to be dead, buried beneath layers of sermons and wine. I had been young then, reckless, too eager to be holy. A single mistake with the candles. A scream. And flames devouring everything pure. I whispered, "No." But the voice hissed, "Liar." The confessional shook. The wood between us cracked like bones. Through the slits, I saw an eye not human, but shaped like my own reflection, staring back with pity. "Your shadow saw it all," it said. "Your shadow remembers every soul you let burn." I stumbled out, falling to the cold stone floor. The church was silent again, except for the faint smell of smoke that shouldn't have been there. My robes were covered in ash, though no candles burned nearby. When I turned to look back at the confessional, the door was open. Inside, the seat was empty except for a black handprint on the wall. My handprint. My shadow's hand. That night, I rang the church bell myself, once for the living, once for the dead, and once more for whatever was now haunting me. And as the last echo faded into the hills, I heard my own voice whisper from the altar. "Forgive me, Father Aurelio, for I am about to sin again." Episode 3, The Mirror That Wouldn't Reflect. They say mirrors never lie. But mine stopped telling the truth long before I dared to look again. After that night in the confessional, the church no longer felt like sanctuary, only like a waiting mouth ready to swallow me whole. Every corner breathed, every echo remembered my name. The villagers still came for mass, but they avoided my gaze. Perhaps they saw what I had not yet dared to, that I was already becoming less man, more absence. It began with a sound. A sharp crack, glass fracturing upstairs, in my chamber. I rushed in, thinking it was the wind, but the air was still. On the floor lay my old mirror, the one I had carried since seminary days. It had fallen from the wall, though the nail still clung firmly in place. As I bent to lift it, my blood froze. Because even as I knelt before the mirror, it did not show me. The room behind me was clear, the bed, the candle, the window half open to the night. But the space where I knelt was empty. The glass was cold, almost wet, as though it had been weeping. Then, in the corner of the reflection, something moved. A faint ripple, like smoke behind the surface. I leaned closer, and for a moment, my face appeared pale, trembling, but then it smiled. I hadn't. My reflection was smiling on its own. I stumbled back. The candlelight flickered wildly, throwing shadows that didn't belong to me. My reflection stayed perfectly still, its grin widening until it split impossibly across its face. "You look better without faith," it whispered. The voice came not from the air, but from inside the glass, as if the mirror itself was speaking. I grabbed the Bible and slammed it against the reflection. The mirror shattered, raining 100 tiny shards across the floor. For a heartbeat, I thought it was over, until I realized every shard still reflected the same smiling face, watching me from 100 angles. They began to whisper in unison. "Why did you bury us, Father? Why did you bury me?" I fell to my knees, clutching the rosary until it cut into my palms. In nomine Patris, I began, but my voice cracked before I could finish. The shards darkened. One by one, the reflections blinked, not together, but separately, like eyes opening in the dark. The last one near my foot showed something new, my missing shadow standing behind me, one hand reaching forward. The room plunged into blackness as the candles died. I could feel my fingers resting on my shoulder from behind. When I woke hours later, the floor was clean. The mirror gone. Not broken, simply gone, frame and all. Yet across the wall, drawn in black soot, was a single sentence written backward, so that I could only read it through the reflection of a silver chalice nearby. The next mirror will not show your body, Father, only your soul. That night, I covered every window with cloth. But even in the darkness, I saw the faint shimmer of glass, waiting for me to look again. Episode 4, The Boy Who Drew the Darkness. Children see what adults are trained to ignore. And that is why, when I saw the boy's drawings, I finally understood how much I had already lost. His name was Tomas. Barely 8 years old, thin as a reed, with eyes that never seemed to blink long enough. His mother brought him to me after Sunday Mass, trembling, clutching a handful of crumpled papers. She said he'd been waking at night, whispering my name. At first, I smiled gently, the way priests are supposed to when faced with a child's fears. Dreams are nothing to fear, I told him. But then Tomas unfolded his drawings on my desk and my breath caught in my throat. Each page was the same scene, me, standing before the altar, my cassock drawn in thick black charcoal. But behind me, a tall figure. Taller than any man. Its shape was a smear of pure shadow, faceless but unmistakably alive. I turned one of the papers around. "Who is this?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. Tomas didn't hesitate. "He stands behind you when you pray," he said. "But he doesn't pray back." A chill moved through the rectory like a sigh. The boy's mother made the sign of the cross and begged him to stop speaking nonsense. But Tomas only looked up at me, his small voice steady. "He says he's waiting for you to finish burying him." That night, I couldn't stop staring at those drawings. I burned one over a candle flame, whispering the Lord's Prayer. But as the paper blackened, the shadowed figure refused to disappear, it lingered on the curling edges like something unwilling to die. I went to Tomas's home the next evening. The village was quiet, the fog heavy enough to swallow sound. His mother opened the door, pale and shaking. "He's been drawing again," she said. On the table lay a fresh sheet. This time, it wasn't the church. It was a graveyard. My graveyard. And on one of the tombstones, written in the uncertain hand of a child, was my name. Before I could speak, we heard it, 3 knocks at the door, slow and deliberate. I stepped outside, clutching my crucifix. The fog was thick, but through it, I saw footprints leading away from the house, small at first, then larger, as though a child had been walking beside something that grew taller with every step. The next morning, Tomas was gone. The villagers searched for days, but all they found was his sketchbook floating in the river. The last drawing showed me kneeling in the church, and behind me, the shadow, finally holding my hand. Since then, I've stopped blessing the children of San Telmo. Not because they are cursed, but because they can still see what's standing behind me. Episode 5, The Whisper in the Holy Water. Faith, I've learned, has a sound. It isn't the hymns or the bells, it's the silence right before you lose it. 4 days after Tomas vanished, the church of San Telmo felt heavier, as if the air itself carried guilt. I found myself whispering prayers without conviction, my voice cracking like a splintered cross. The parishioners still came, but they no longer met my eyes. Perhaps they sensed what I did, that the house of God had begun to breathe on its own. It was during the evening ritual that I first heard the whisper. I was preparing the holy water for Sunday's baptism, a simple act I had done 1,000 times before. The copper basin sat beneath the candlelight, trembling faintly as if touched by an unseen hand. I poured the water, murmuring the blessing, in nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. But instead of the usual soft splash, the water hissed. Not like steam. Like a voice, faint, gurgling, alive. I froze. Then I leaned closer. The surface of the water rippled though the room was still. My reflection wavered, twisting, and for a heartbeat, I saw not my own face, but something darker behind it. My shadow, submerged beneath the surface, lips moving as if to speak. I whispered, "Who are you?" The water responded. Not loud, but unmistakable. A breath. A voice crawling through liquid. "You buried me," it said. "You poured my sins into holy ground and called it forgiveness." The basin trembled violently. Drops splashed against my skin, burning, though the water was cold. I stumbled backward, clutching my hand, and saw that every droplet that touched me left a faint black mark, like ash that wouldn't wash away. Panicking, I threw the basin to the floor. The water spread across the stone in a thin, dark film, moving, flowing toward the altar. It slithered like a living thing, pooling beneath the crucifix. Then came the sound. Not from the church, not from the wind, but from beneath the floorboards. A slow, dragging breath. As though something long buried was trying to breathe through the cracks. I backed away until my shoulder hit the wall. "Leave me!" I shouted. "In the name of Christ!" The whisper answered, clear now, echoing through every drop of water that shimmered on the floor. "He left us too, Father." The candles died all at once, plunging the church into a darkness that felt wet, suffocating. I could still hear it, the water moving, whispering, circling me like a prayer said backward. When light returned at dawn, the floor was dry. But the basin was full again. Perfectly still. And floating on the surface, like a secret unburied, was my rosary, the one I had lost years ago in the fire. I did not touch it. I only stared at the faint ripples forming around it, and the words they spelled in the water. Baptize me again. Episode 6, The Funeral Without a Body. By then, the village of San Telmo had grown afraid of its own church. They still came to Mass, but their prayers were whispers, fragile, trembling things that refused to rise above the pews. Every candle I lit seemed to burn shorter than the one before, as if the wax itself feared to last too long in my presence. It was on a Tuesday morning when the carriage arrived. Black, unmarked, drawn by 2 horses whose eyes looked clouded, like glass. The driver said nothing. He handed me a sealed letter bearing the seal of the diocese. A funeral must be held immediately. The deceased, Father Aurelio de San Telmo. I read it twice, certain it was some clerical mistake. But there it was, my name, written in ink that shimmered faintly red in the sunlight, as though mixed with blood. The coffin inside the carriage was closed, heavy, and silent. No mourners. No flowers. The driver left before I could ask another word. I stood alone with my own casket, staring at the wood as a cold realization crept through me. The date carved into the lid was the same as today. I tried to laugh, a dry, brittle sound. Some joke, I said aloud. A cruel one. But when I reached for my crucifix, I realized my hands were shaking too much to make the sign of the cross. The church bell rang once, by itself. I opened the coffin. There was no body. Only my old rosary, the one I'd lost in the holy water, resting atop a folded piece of cloth, my own vestment, torn and burned at the edges. Beneath it, a photograph, me as a young novice, smiling, standing in sunlight that no longer exists. As I lifted the picture, a gust of air escaped from the coffin, cold, dry, and foul, like a tomb breathing out a secret. The candles flickered. The scent of soil filled the room. Then I heard it. A knock. From inside the coffin. 3 slow beats, like a heart remembering how to move. I stumbled backward, clutching the edge of a pew. The lid shifted, not lifted, just trembled slightly, as if something beneath it wanted out but wasn't ready yet. "Who are you?" I whispered. The voice that answered came from beneath the floorboards. "You already buried me once," it said. "But a priest who buries his shadow must one day lie beside it." The coffin lid creaked open just enough for a sliver of darkness to spill out, a mist that crawled along the floor like spilled ink. It slithered toward the altar, where the sunlight cut through the stained glass. But the light didn't drive it away, instead, it bent around it, like light avoiding guilt. I dropped to my knees. "What do you want from me?" The whispers surrounded me, filling the church like the echo of my own confession. "To finish what you started, Father. There are still prayers unsaid, graves unfilled." When I blinked, the coffin was gone. Only its outline remained, burned into the stone like a shadow scorched by divine fire. That night, I dreamed of the cemetery. Every grave was open, yawning, waiting, and in the distance, a second coffin beside mine. Identical. Empty. When I awoke, I found a single black feather resting on my chest. And written beneath it on the bedsheet, in my own handwriting, "The next funeral will have a body." Episode 7, The Woman in the Red Veil. Some say temptation wears perfume. Mine wore the scent of wilted roses and ash. It was the eve of All Souls' Day when she arrived, just before the storm, when the sky hung heavy like a dying lung. I was preparing the altar, half expecting the dead to come confess before the living did, when I heard her steps echo through the church. Soft. Measured. Certain. She stood at the entrance, cloaked in crimson, her face veiled in silk so thin I could see the outline of lips that didn't quite smile. Her hands were pale, almost luminous in the candlelight, clutching a rosary black as coal. "Father Aurelio," she said, and though her voice was quiet, it carried like a hymn through the nave. "I've come to speak for the one who cannot." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Who sent you?" "The same one you buried," she replied. "The one who followed you into every prayer and never came out." My knees weakened. I wanted to shout, to demand her name, but something about her stillness made words useless. She moved toward the altar, each step as fluid as smoke. When she reached the font of holy water, she dipped her fingers in and the water turned black. "You shouldn't be here," I managed to whisper. "And yet," she said, lifting her veil just enough for me to glimpse the impossible, her eyes were not eyes at all, but 2 shimmering pools of reflected light. They showed me, myself. Every sin. Every secret. Every shadow I'd thought the earth had taken. She smiled faintly. "You cannot cast out what you never truly confessed." Lightning split the sky outside. The church groaned, the crucifix above the altar shuddering on its chain. She leaned close enough for me to feel her breath, cold and sweet, like incense left too long in the tomb. "I can give you peace, Father," she whispered. "All you must do is accept that you were never meant to serve the light." I stepped back, clutching the cross at my neck, but the metal burned my palm as if rejecting me. "Who are you?" I cried. Her laughter was soft, nearly kind. "Names are for those who are still alive in the sight of God," she said. "But if you must call me something, call me the Mother of Shadows." She walked toward the confessional, gliding more than stepping, and disappeared inside it. The door creaked shut. I ran after her, tore it open. Empty. Only the scent of roses remained. Roses in ash. That night, the storm broke. The rain struck the windows like fists. I prayed until my voice gave out, but her words wouldn't leave me. You cannot cast out what you never confessed. When I finally dared to look at the mirror above my desk, I saw her standing behind me in the reflection, the red veil floating like smoke, and heard her voice once more, almost tender. Every priest needs a confessor, my son. Even you. Episode 8, When the Bells Rang Backwards. I had always believed that the church bell could only speak one language, the solemn song of farewell. But that night, it began to sing in reverse. It was just after Vespers. The storm that had carried the woman in the red veil had passed, leaving behind a silence so thick it smothered even the insects. The air still smelled of her roses and ash, memory and sin. I was alone, or so I prayed. I was writing in the parish log when it started, one hollow chime, then another, then a third, but wrong. The tone was reversed, as if time itself had forgotten which way death should travel. The bells were tolling backward. I rushed out into the courtyard, my cassock snapping in the wind. The bell tower loomed above, its silhouette trembling in the moonlight. The rope swung wildly, but no one stood there. I climbed the stairs two at a time, heart hammering against my ribs. When I reached the top, the great bronze bell was moving on its own, pulling itself back and forth in slow, painful motion. And beneath it, etched into the floor by some unseen hand, was a single line of words carved into the wood. For the funeral of the living. I backed away, the air thick with the stench of iron and rain. Then I heard footsteps below, dozens of them, shuffling through the church. I looked down from the tower and saw them, the villagers. Their faces pale, their eyes empty. Each held a candle, and each candle burned with black flame. They moved toward the altar in complete silence, forming two lines. When they stopped, the church doors slammed shut of their own accord. And then, from the center aisle, I saw her. The woman in the red veil. She carried a coffin, small, like a child's, and set it before the altar. Her veil shimmered with drops of rain or tears, I could no longer tell the difference. Tonight, she called, voice echoing through the nave, we gather for the soul that refuses to die. And the bells above me began to toll faster, harder, backward, as though trying to undo time itself. The villagers bowed their heads, and their lips began to move in a prayer that no human tongue should ever form. I ran down, shouting, "Stop this! Stop, in the name of Christ!" But as I reached the altar, the coffin lid creaked open, and inside, I saw myself. Not as I was, but as I would be, pale, cold, hands folded over a crucifix turned upside down. I staggered back. This is a lie. I screamed. The woman turned to me. Her veil fluttered as if stirred by breath that was not her own. "No, Father Aurelio," she said softly. "This is the truth unburied." The bell struck one final note, the sound of glass breaking inside the soul. And then, everything went still. When I woke, it was dawn. The villagers were gone. The church was empty, the air thick with dust. The coffin remained before the altar, closed once more. But when I touched it, it was warm. And carved along its edge, in the same trembling script, were words I had never written but somehow remembered. The next time the bells ring, they will call your name. Episode 9, The Mass for the Forgotten God. I once believed the Mass could only be spoken for the glory of God. But that night, I learned there are other gods, ones born from silence, guilt, and shadow. The day after the bells tolled backward, the church would not stop breathing. Yes, breathing. The wooden pews groaned like lungs drawing air, and every candle flickered as though in rhythm with a heartbeat buried deep beneath the altar. When I placed my hand on the stone floor, it pulsed. Slow. Deliberate. Alive. That night, the voice came again. Not the woman's. not my shadows. This one was deeper, old as the dark between stars. Say the Mass, Aurelio. I froze in my cell, the air turning cold enough to choke. For whom? I whispered. For the one you forgot. I told myself it was madness. That I was hearing echoes of my own guilt. But when I entered the church, I saw the chalice already waiting on the altar. The wine had poured itself. The bread lay beside it, soaked red. And the congregation had returned. Rows of villagers sat silently in the pews, their faces gray, hollow, unbreathing. Each held a candle burning black. Each eye fixed on me. Say it, the voice urged. And before I could stop myself, I began. In nomine. But the words came out wrong. Twisted. I didn't recognize my own voice, it was heavier, layered, as if someone else was speaking through me. The candles hissed with every syllable. The air turned thick and bitter, smelling of rust and forgotten blood. The villagers began to hum, low and steady. It wasn't a hymn. It was a remembering. A chant without beginning or end. My hand shook as I lifted the chalice. The liquid inside shimmered black, reflecting not the church ceiling, but a sky without stars. Drink, the voice commanded. My throat burned as I obeyed. The taste was not wine, it was memory. It showed me things, the orphanage fire, the graves I blessed without bodies, the woman's veil rising like smoke. And beneath it all, I saw him. My shadow. Kneeling before an altar made of bones, whispering prayers in reverse. When I opened my eyes, I was no longer standing. I was kneeling before the congregation, the chalice spilled, the candles extinguished. But their eyes still glowed faintly in the dark, hundreds of dying embers waiting to reignite. And then, in unison, they spoke. Not with their mouths, but from somewhere deeper. Your God forgot us, Father. But we did not forget you. Their faces began to dissolve, melting into smoke that drifted toward the altar, swirling into the shape of something vast. A presence. A being too immense for the church to contain. I dropped the crucifix from my neck. It hit the floor with a sound like a final heartbeat. The voice whispered once more, gentle as a lullaby. Every faith begins with light, but true devotion begins when the light dies. The candles flared to life again, this time with blood-red flames. And I knew then whose mass I had spoken. Not for God, but for the shadow that had taken his place. Episode 10, The Tomb Beneath the Altar. They told us the altar was built upon holy ground, a foundation of faith, not of flesh. They never said what was buried beneath it. After the night of the Mass, I stopped hearing the living. The church stood empty, yet the pews still creaked as if someone unseen knelt upon them. I avoided the altar during daylight, but every dusk it called to me, a low vibration in the stones, like a heartbeat begging to be acknowledged. And then came the blood. It began as a single crimson line seeping from beneath the marble steps. By morning, it had pooled like wine, thick and glistening in the candlelight. I knelt beside it, trembling. The scent was unmistakable iron and salt, not symbolic, not holy. I fetched a lantern and pried open the trapdoor beneath the altar, one that hadn't been touched in centuries. A draft of cold air rose from below, carrying the faintest sound of murmuring, not echo, but prayer. Prayer said backward. I descended. The stairway was narrow, lined with bricks blackened by time. The deeper I went, the louder the whispering became. It wasn't many voices, it was one, layered endlessly upon itself, as though speaking from every direction. At the bottom, I found a crypt. And in the center of it, a single coffin. Its lid was carved with Latin words I could barely read through the dust. Corpus lux mea. My body is my light. I brushed the dust away and froze. Beneath that inscription was my name. I staggered back, lantern trembling in my hand. The whispers swelled, shaping into words that were not words, something older than language. The coffin lid began to shift, inch by inch, as though stirred by the breath of the dead. I shouted into the dark, "Who are you?" The voice came not from the coffin, but from behind me. "Who do you think you buried, Father?" I turned, and there, at the edge of the lantern's glow, stood my shadow. Whole again, tall and calm, its form rippling as though underwater. Its eyes glowed faintly, like coals under ash. "You put me here," it said. "Every lie, every silence, every sin you blessed without forgiveness. You buried me beneath your altar and called it faith." It stepped closer, and I felt the cold bloom in my chest like a wound reopening. "I was the part of you that still believed," it whispered. "Until you traded faith for absolution." The shadow reached toward the coffin and placed its hand upon the lid. The stone turned soft, melting into earth. And from that earth, I saw hands emerge pale, reaching, countless, the hands of every soul I had buried without confession. They clawed at the air, at me, at heaven that would never open. I fell to my knees, clutching the cross that no longer burned. "What do you want from me?" I cried. The shadow smiled. "To finish the ritual." It pressed a single finger against my chest. The touch burned, not with heat, but with memory. I saw flashes, the orphanage fire, the graves, the woman's red veil. And then darkness. When I awoke, I was back inside the church. The trapdoor was sealed. The altar spotless. But carved into the marble, faint yet unmistakable, were 7 new letters, letters written by my own trembling hand. Aurelio. Below it, another line had appeared overnight, carved by something unseen. Every priest buries something. You buried yourself. Episode 11, The Candle That Cried Blood. There are nights when faith burns, and nights when it bleeds. That night, it did both. After finding my name carved into the altar, I could no longer pray. Each word felt hollow, scraped clean of meaning. The villagers had stopped coming altogether, the church belonged to silence now. Only the candles remained faithful, standing in rows like obedient soldiers of light. Or so I thought. It began at twilight. I lit the candles for Vespers, one by one, whispering a prayer for the dead. The flames trembled as though recognizing the names I dared not speak. The air was heavy with wax and fear. Then I saw it, a single drop forming on the lip of the tallest candle. Red. Not wax. It slid down the candle's side, thick and slow, leaving behind a trail too dark to be light. I touched it with my fingertip, warm. Sticky. Blood. The other candles began to weep too. One after another, crimson tears dripping onto the altar until the marble seemed to breathe again. The room dimmed, the flames bending inward as if suffocating beneath their own grief. Then the whispers started, faint at first, like wind in a graveyard. But the closer I leaned, the clearer they became. Not prayers. Confessions. Every drop that hit the altar carried a voice. I stole. I lied. I burned. I killed. Hundreds of sins, spilling out in blood. I stumbled backward, clutching my rosary. Stop this, I begged. Your holy light, you cannot confess. But the tallest candle flared, its flame stretching impossibly long, twisting into the shape of a face, my own. It spoke in a voice cracked with sorrow. You silenced us, Father. My knees gave way. The voices grew louder, overlapping, the dead, the forgotten, the unshriven. Each drop that fell hissed my name. The church floor was slick with red, pooling at my feet, running in rivulets toward the pews as though seeking the lost. I tried to extinguish the candles, one by one. But every time I blew, the flame only grew darker, black fire devouring the wicks, until the light no longer illuminated, only revealed. In that strange half-glow, I saw them. Figures lining the aisles. Men, women, children, faces I recognized from funerals long past. Eyes empty, mouths open, each holding a candle that bled the same red tears. They whispered together, a single, rising chant. You buried our voices. Now let us speak through yours. I felt the air crush against my chest as if the entire church inhaled me. My throat tightened, and when I tried to cry out, their words came instead of mine. Confessions spilled from my mouth, every secret, every death I'd blessed with lies, every sin I'd hidden behind the cloth. The candles blazed once more, their flames white and pure, then, all at once, died. When I awoke, the floor was clean. No blood. No voices. Only one candle remained, burned down to its base, still warm to the touch. And carved into the wax, as if written by fire itself, were the words. One more sin left unspoken, Father. Your own. Episode 12, The Child He Never Baptized. Some ghosts come screaming. Others come softly, like children calling your name from behind a door you swore was locked. It was the third night after the candles bled that I first heard the knocking. 3 taps. Always 3. Just before dawn, when the world is too tired to tell the living from the dead. At first, I thought it was the wind against the chapel door. But when I opened it, the air was still. No one stood outside, only a small trail of muddy footprints leading toward the baptismal font. Bare feet. A child's. My stomach turned cold. The font was filled to the brim, though I hadn't blessed it in days. The water rippled, though the air didn't move. As I leaned closer, the ripples formed words, soft, fleeting, impossible. You forgot me. I stepped back, trembling. Who are you? The church answered not with echo but with breath, a tiny sigh that smelled faintly of smoke and milk. The kind of smell that lives in memory, not time. Then came the laughter. Gentle, fragile, like a bell underwater. It came from the confessional. I pushed open the door. The air inside was cold and damp. A small handprint stained the wooden seat, the print of a child. And then, from the other side of the grill, a whisper. Father, why didn't you save me? My knees weakened. The voice, it wasn't angry. It was disappointed. I don't know who you are, I stammered. The whisper came again, closer now, almost breathing against my ear. You do. You knew my mother. And then I remembered. Her name was Clara. A woman from my first parish, decades ago. Poor, devout, desperate. She came to me with a child she said was born of sin. Mine. I had denied her, sent her away. She died in the river that winter. The child was never baptized. My vision blurred as tears and terror mixed. No. A small figure stepped out from the shadows, no taller than my waist, barefoot, skin pale as moonlight. He looked at me with eyes that burned, not with hate, but with longing. In his hands, he held a broken crucifix. Water cannot wash what you refuse to name, he said. You buried my mother with prayers, but you left me in the dark. He stepped closer. The floor creaked, but his reflection did not appear in the polished stone. Only mine, shrinking, trembling, hollow. Baptize me, Father, he whispered. Before your light dies too. I reached for the holy water, but when I dipped my fingers in, it turned black. My hand blistered. The font bubbled like boiling tar. The boy smiled, not cruelly, but with unbearable sadness. "It's too late now. I was baptized by your shadow." And with that, he dissolved into smoke, leaving behind a single drop of water on the confessional floor, red as blood, cold as forgiveness. I fell to my knees, choking on my own prayers. The church was silent again, yet I could still hear the faint echo of a child's voice fading into the rafters. "Every priest is a father, Aurelio. But not every father saves his child." When dawn came, the baptismal font was empty. But on its rim, scratched deep into the stone, were two small words in the handwriting of a child. "Thank you." Episode 13, The Night the Cross Turned Upside Down. Faith doesn't shatter in an instant. It bends quietly, painfully, until even the cross forgets which way heaven lies. That night, the church was too still. The air thickened, swollen with the scent of wax and iron. The candles refused to burn, and the wind outside hummed a low, endless note, like the world itself holding its breath. I stood before the altar, clutching the only crucifix that hadn't yet blackened. Its silver gleam had dulled, but it still felt warm against my palm, alive, almost. I told myself that meant God hadn't left me. Then, somewhere above, the bell tower moaned, a sound too low, too human. When I looked up, I saw it. The great cross hanging above the altar began to tremble, swaying on its chain. The ceiling groaned as though something beneath the wood was pushing upward. The congregation of shadows that had gathered in my nightmares now gathered in truth, crawling up the walls, stretching from the corners like roots searching for light. I whispered the Lord's Prayer. The first words came out steady, the rest broke into whispers. "Deliver us from evil." But the cross answered before I could finish. It turned. Slowly. Deliberately. The sound was like bone grinding against stone. Screws snapped, the chain twisted, and in one motion too smooth to be human, the cross flipped, the Christ now hanging upside down, his head bowed toward me like a man peering into his own grave. I staggered backward, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it echo through the nave. And then the whisper returned, not from the shadows, not from the walls, but from the mouth of the crucifix itself. "Did you really think I was still watching?" The voice was weary, almost compassionate. It wasn't his voice. It was mine. I dropped the cross I was holding. It hit the floor and shattered into 3 pieces. The church grew darker, though no light had gone out. Every corner pulsed, alive with something waiting. "You prayed to me," the voice continued. "But every prayer you spoke was to bury another sin. Every sermon you preached was another grave." The body on the inverted cross began to change. Its face blurred, first blood, then shadow, then me. My own likeness, twisted in agony, mouth open in a silent scream. I tried to look away, but my reflection followed. Every surface, every window, every flicker of light showed that same image, the priest knelt not for faith, but for denial. The doors of the church burst open. Wind roared through the nave, carrying with it 1,000 whispers, confessions long forgotten, swirling in a storm of ash. I could taste the words on my tongue. They were bitter, and they were true. I fell to my knees. "What do you want from me?" I shouted into the wind. The shadow of the cross loomed long across the floor, reaching toward me like a hand. And that same voice, my voice, answered from everywhere at once. "To stop pretending you still believe." The candles reignited, their flames black as pitch. The inverted Christ's eyes opened. And for the first time, I understood, it was never about losing faith, it was about being seen by what came after it. When the wind finally died, the cross hung still again, upright once more. But Christ's head was turned, facing me, and his eyes were open. And he was smiling. Episode 14, The Village of Silent Prayers. There is a sound that only the damned can hear. The sound of prayers that never leave the lips. When I awoke after the night the cross turned upside down, San Telmo had gone quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of dawn after a storm, no. This was the silence of a wound that refuses to bleed. I stepped outside and saw the streets empty. The mist clung to the cobblestones like shrouds. Doors were open, meals half-eaten, candles still burning in windows where no one remained. But the air was full of whispers that didn't move the wind. The entire village was praying. Without speaking. Their voices existed, but not their mouths. I heard them inside my skull, fragments of psalms and pleas, repeated endlessly in an invisible choir. I followed the murmurs to the plaza, where the villagers stood in a perfect circle, their eyes closed, faces tilted toward the sky. In the center was the woman in the red veil. Her veil fluttered though there was no breeze. Around her, the villagers knelt as if before a queen, their bodies swaying in rhythm to a prayer I could no longer recognize. She lifted her hand, and the whispers stopped. The silence hit me like a scream. "Father Aurelio," she said softly, "you've finally come to hear the prayer you silenced." I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. "What have you done to them?" "Nothing," she smiled. "They've simply learned the truth that words no longer reach the heavens. Only silence does." She stepped toward me, and the villagers parted like waves. "You buried your sins beneath holy ground," she whispered. "And now, your faith has buried them all." I looked into her face, and for the first time, she lifted her veil. There was no skin, no eyes, no mouth. Only darkness shaped like a woman. And within that darkness, I saw the faces of every soul I'd failed, Tomas, Clara, the boy, the nameless dead. They looked at me, lips moving soundlessly, each one trying to pray, but the words died before reaching light. I dropped to my knees. "Take me," I begged. "Leave them." She tilted her head, almost gently. "You still believe there's a you left to take." The villagers began to hum again, not words, just vibration. The ground beneath us trembled. Cracks split the cobblestones, revealing faint light below, not divine light, but red, pulsing, alive. The air grew heavy, the hum deepening until it became a single, endless tone that drowned my heartbeat. My ears bled, and still I heard their prayer, one long breath of devotion twisted into despair. I covered my ears and screamed, "God, hear them." The woman smiled. "He can't hear silence." Then she vanished. The villagers stopped moving, frozen mid-prayer, mouths open but empty. Their eyes were glass. When I returned to the church, I found the confession box open. Inside, carved into the wood, were words that hadn't been there before. "You silenced them, Father. You taught them how." I sat there until dawn, surrounded by silence so thick it felt alive. For the first time, I prayed not to be forgiven, but to be heard. No one answered. Only the faintest echo came back, from somewhere deep beneath the floor. "Your shadow hears you." Episode 15, The Grave of the Lightless Man. Every story ends in the ground. Mine was already waiting for me. For 3 nights, I did not sleep. The church no longer spoke, it breathed. The altar pulsed faintly with the rhythm of a buried heart, and the silence outside pressed against the walls like an ocean. I could feel something calling from beneath the floor. My name, whispered over and over, worn smooth from use. By the 4th night, I knew what it wanted. I took the lantern and the old spade from the crypt. The storm had not yet begun, but the clouds hung low enough to scrape the steeple. I walked into the graveyard, every step sinking deeper into the mud, the world folding in around me. There, beneath the yew tree where the earth was blackest, I found it, a mound of soil that hadn't been there before. No headstone. No flowers. Just a wooden sign, carved crudely with a single word. Aurelio. My breath caught. My hands trembled. I fell to my knees. "No," I whispered. "Not yet." But the ground answered with a shiver. The soil rippled, breathing. From beneath came a hollow thud, then another, as if someone were knocking from inside the coffin. I raised the lantern, my heart breaking open in my chest. "What do you want from me?" And then came the voice, soft, familiar, echoing from below. "Not forgiveness, just company." The wind howled through the trees, shaking the branches like bones. I began to dig. I don't remember choosing to. My body moved on its own, the spade slicing through wet earth, each strike accompanied by the whisper of prayers I no longer remembered how to believe in. At last, the blade struck wood. I knelt, wiping the soil away. The coffin was simple, unmarked, damp with age. My fingers brushed against its lid, and it was warm. The whisper came again, clearer now. "You buried me, Father. But you never stayed to bless the grave." I opened the coffin. Inside was myself. Pale, still, eyes closed, hands folded over a cross turned upside down. My lips were moving, murmuring the last words of a dying prayer. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. My shadow stood behind the coffin, taller now, its face almost kind. "It's time," it said. "You've absolved everyone but yourself." It reached out a hand, and I, trembling, weeping, took it. The air filled with light, not divine but hollow, as if the stars had bled their last. My skin turned cold. My heart slowed. The world began to fade, but before it did, the shadow leaned close, whispering one final truth. "There was never a curse, Aurelio. There was only you hiding from the light you buried." When I awoke, it was dawn. The grave was sealed. The church bell rang once, clear and hollow. The villagers returned that morning and found two graves under the yew tree, one old, one fresh. Both marked with the same name. And in the church, the altar stood clean again. The candles burned steady. But the shadow of the priest, the one that once betrayed the light, never returned to the wall. Because sometimes, redemption isn't found in heaven. It's found 6 feet below it.
Epilogue: The Legend of the Shadowed Priest. Years have passed since Father Aurelio vanished from San Telmo. The church still stands, crooked, silent, and too cold even in summer. The villagers say the wind that sweeps through its doors smells faintly of candle wax and confession, though no priest has served there since. They buried him twice, or so the story goes. One grave for his body, and one for his shadow. Children are warned never to play near the yew tree at the edge of the cemetery, where the grass never grows and the ground hums after midnight. They say if you kneel there and whisper a sin you've never confessed, a voice will answer from below. It doesn't forgive, it only listens. Some nights, travelers passing through San Telmo claim to see a light inside the church long after the doors are locked, a dim flicker, like a candle trembling in a dead man's hand. Others say they've heard the bell toll 3 times at dawn, though there's no rope, no wind, and no living soul to pull it. The old women of the village still cross themselves when they speak his name. They call him El Padre Sin Luz, the lightless father. A priest who tried to bury his sins, and in doing so, buried himself. But there is one story no one tells aloud. It belongs to those who have sinned so deeply they no longer seek absolution. They come to San Telmo under moonless skies, carrying candles, leaving them at the church door. The next morning, the candles are always lit, and always half-burned, as if someone had prayed beside them through the night. They say if you stand before the altar at dawn, just as the light breaks through the stained glass, you can see him. Father Aurelio. Kneeling. Still in his torn vestments. Head bowed. No shadow falls at his feet. Only the faint shimmer of something buried, something waiting. And if you listen closely, beyond the hum of the empty church, you'll hear it. A whisper rising through the cracks of the floor. Every man buries his light, child. But only some are brave enough to dig it back up.